All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling decision intelligence, and honestly, just the name, has me thinking. Robots making all our choices. Am I even close?
Not quite, haha.
Huh.
Though I can see why you'd think that. It does have a bit of a sci-fi ring to it. Let's get a solid definition to start. How about that? The Gartner IT Glossary defines decision intelligence, or DI, as a practical discipline that advances decision-making by explicitly understanding and engineering how decisions are made and how outcomes are evaluated, managed, and improved via feedback.
Wow, that's a mouthful. It's like they squeezed an entire philosophy of decision making into a single sentence.
Exactly. And there are a few key parts in there that really jump out. Like, first, DI isn't just about the moment you make the choice. It's about the whole process leading up to it, the whole decision-making journey.
Okay, so understanding how we even arrive at a decision in the first place.
Yeah. Both in our own minds and like within organizations. Then it's about how we actually measure the results, right? We get feedback. And then the crucial bit, using all that to actually get better next time.
So it's less about making the single right choice and more about building a better system for consistently making good choices.
You got it. And that engineering word they use, that's
Yeah.
really key. DI is about bringing structure, a deliberate, almost like a scientific approach to decision making. Less gut feeling, more evidence.
Okay, see, now that's where I get a little, I don't know, skeptical. Doesn't too much thinking, sometimes kill creativity. What about intuition? Aren't there times when just going with your gut is the best move?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great point. And you're right. DI isn't about getting rid of human judgment completely. It's more like giving it a boost with data and a solid framework.
So like having a toolkit, right? Sometimes you need the hammer, sometimes the screwdriver. You wouldn't use a hammer to tighten a screw.
Exactly. The right tool for the job. And DI is adding like some really powerful new tools to that decision-making toolkit. Things like being really clear about your goals, how you'll measure success, modeling different scenarios to see what could happen, using data to make smarter choices, and then always refining how you do it based on what you learn along the way.
Okay, yeah. I can see how this would be super helpful for big, complicated decisions. Like, imagine a company deciding on a major tech investment.
Perfect example. With DI, they could break that huge decision into manageable steps, like, okay, what are their goals for this investment? How will they even measure success? Then, they could use data to model different possibilities, like what if this tech takes off? What if it totally flops? So they're not just relying on hype or gut feelings, they're using data to inform the decision.
And even if they get it wrong, they can still learn from what happened, right?
Absolutely. Continuous improvement. That's the heart of DI. Every decision is a chance to learn. By tracking what happens, analyzing what worked and what didn't, they can refine their approach for next time.
Makes sense. But hey, let's shift gears a sec. The Gartner glossary entry, it mentions all these other terms, AI simulation, autonomic systems, and a bunch more. Are those just fancy buzzwords, or do they actually tie into decision intelligence?
Oh, they're definitely connected. They show how DI fits in with all these other like emerging technologies. Take AI simulation, for instance. That's where you use AI to basically build a virtual model of a real system.
Like a flight simulator, but for business decision.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine using AI to simulate, say, launching a new product. You could test different strategies, see how different factors play out. You get a better idea of the risks and potential before you make the actual decision in the real world.
Wow, that's wild. It's like having a crystal ball for business.
And it's a perfect example of how AI can be this really powerful tool within the whole DI framework.
So it's not that AI is making the calls itself, but it's giving us the insights, the info to make better decisions.
Precisely. And this brings us to autonomic systems, another one of those terms. These are systems that can manage themselves, adapt to changes without humans needing to step in. Think self-driving cars or smart thermostats.
Is this where we get back to the robots making all our decisions?
Not quite. Autonomic systems are more about automating specific tasks or processes. They definitely have a part to play in decision making, but they're usually designed to work within preset rules and boundaries.
Okay, so super efficient helpers, not like rogue AI taking over.
Exactly. And the key is all these things, AI simulation, autonomic systems, and decision intelligence, they're all kind of woven together. It's this big shift toward a more data-driven, automated, and intelligent way of solving problems.
And even though it's still early days, it sounds like this has the potential to, really change how we make decisions in every part of life, from work to our personal choices. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. What are some concrete things someone listening to this right now could actually do? How can they start using decision intelligence in their own lives?
That's a great question and something we'll dig deeper into as we go. But I think one of the simplest yet most powerful things anyone could do is to start paying more attention to how they make decisions right now. Just start asking yourself, what are my goals? What info am I using to make these choices?
Yeah, so simple, but I bet most of us, we rarely stop and actually think about that. We're kind of on autopilot.
Exactly. And just by bringing a little more awareness to our decisions, we can start to see those areas where we might be making assumptions, letting biases slip in, or just not having enough information.
So step one, become aware of how we're already making decisions. And then we can start improving things from there.
You got it. And from there, we can start trying out some of those DI tools we talked about. Setting clear goals, considering different options, gathering data, and then really reflecting on what happens afterwards.
I'm already getting a lot to think about here, and I bet our listeners are too. They're starting to see what decision intelligence can do. But before we wrap up this first part, there's one more thing I gotta ask. This whole scientific approach to decision making, it sounds great in theory, but does it always work in real life? Are there situations where, maybe a more intuitive approach is actually better?
Oh, that's a really insightful question, and it's one we're going to tackle head on in the next part. We'll look at some real-world examples, cases where DI has worked and some where it hasn't, see if it really lives up to all the hype.
Okay, all right. Listeners, hang tight. We'll be back in just a bit to continue our exploration of decision intelligence. All right, so we're back, and we're diving deeper into decision intelligence. Before we were talking about this scientific approach to making decisions, and I gotta say, I'm still not totally sold. Part of me loves the idea of using more data, more structure, but then there's this other part, that worries about overthinking things. Like, do we lose something important when we try to analyze everything?
Yeah, I get that. It's a balance, right? Lots of people feel that tension. It's good to question any approach, even one as buzzworthy as DI. It's not a magic solution or anything. There are no guarantees when it comes to decisions, right? But what DI give you is a framework. It helps you make more informed choices, even when things are uncertain.
So it's not about eliminating risk completely, it's about managing it better.
Exactly. And to see how this actually works in the real world, let's look at some examples. How about some companies already using DI, both the successes and maybe some cases where it didn't go so well?
Okay, yeah, hit me with a success story, something that'll make me a believer in DI.
All right, how about this? There's this big online retailer. They were having a nightmare with inventory management. Tons of data on what customers buy, but they still couldn't predict demand, ending up with way too much of some stuff and not enough of others.
Yeah, that's gotta hurt the bottom line.
Big time. So they decided to give DI a shot. They started by, really nailing down their goals, fewer stockouts, but also less wasted inventory. Then they brought in machine learning, used algorithms to analyze all that customer data, looking for patterns, anything that could help them predict what people would want in the future and do it more accurately.
So they're letting the AI do all the number crunching?
Right. But remember, it's not just about the tech itself.
Yeah.
It's the whole DI approach.
Yeah.
They didn't just throw an algorithm at the problem and hope for the best. They had their supply chain experts involved, the business analysts too, constantly testing, refining their models based on what was happening in the real world.
So human expertise plus AI working together. I like it.
And the results were impressive. They cut down on both stockouts and excess inventory. More profits, happier customers. It was a win-win.
Okay. I'm seeing the appeal here. But you said there were some pitfalls too, right? What about an example where DI maybe didn't live up to the hype?
Sure. There was this financial institution. They were trying to use DI to make their loan approval process better. Use data to identify borrowers who were more likely to repay their loans, hoping to reduce defaults.
Seems like a good goal. So what went wrong?
The data they used to train their algorithms, it had bias baked into it. It reflected historical lending practices, and those practices had discriminated against certain groups.
Ah, I see. So even with fancy algorithms, the results were still messed up because of the underlying bias in the data.
Exactly, and this is crucial. DI is only as good as the data you feed it. If the data is flawed or biased, the decisions coming out of it will be too.
That brings up some really important ethical questions, right?
Right.
I mean, if we're not careful, DI could actually make existing inequalities worse.
You're absolutely right. It's something to be very mindful of. We have to approach DI with a critical eye, be aware of potential bias in the data.
Hmm.
And human judgment, ethical considerations, those always have to be part of the process.
So DI is a tool, but it's not like a cure-all. We need to use it responsibly, thoughtfully.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And this actually brings us back to a key point about DI. It's not about taking human judgment out of the equation. It's about giving it support, using data, and a clear framework. We use tech to help us make better choices, but at the end of the day, we're still the ones responsible for those choices.
I'm really glad you said that. When I first heard about, decision intelligence, I have to admit, part of me was kind of worried. It felt like we were headed towards this future where machines are making all the big decisions for us.
Yeah, I think that's a valid concern. It's something we need to be aware of as we develop these systems. But I think the important thing to remember is that tech is a tool. It's always been a tool. We're the ones in control. We get to decide how to use it. We can use it to, like, enhance what we can do, help us make better decisions, or, we can use it in a way that actually takes away our agency, reinforces biases. It's our choice.
So it's not humans versus machines. It's humans, A&D machines working together, hopefully, for the benefit of everyone.
Exactly. And that's where the intelligence part of decision intelligence comes in, I think. It's not just crunching numbers, spitting out answers. It's about understanding the context, the ethics, and ultimately making choices that align with our values, our goals as humans.
I've been thinking about this in my own life. We talked about DI for businesses making big decisions. But what about everyday choices? How can the average person actually use these ideas?
That's a great question. DI isn't just for big companies or tech giants. The basic principles apply to any decision, no matter how big or small.
Okay, so how would that even work? Give me an example.
All right, imagine you're trying to figure out what to make for dinner. You could use a DI approach. Start by, defining your goals. Are you going for quick and easy, healthy and nutritious? Or are you trying to, wow your guests with a fancy meal?
Okay, yeah, I see. By setting a clear goal, I'm already being more intentional about it.
Right. Then gather some data. What ingredients do you have? Look up some recipes online. Ask your family what they're in the mood for.
So instead of just staring into the fridge hoping something comes to me, I'm actually getting proactive, getting info.
Exactly. Then you can use all that info to, evaluate your options. Maybe you realize, hey, I have everything for that pasta dish I love and it's healthy too. Or you stumble across a brand new recipe that sounds amazing.
And even if dinner's a total flop, I can still learn from it, right? Like, oh, I overcooked the pasta. Next time, I'll do it differently.
You got it. That's what's great about the DI framework. It's about constantly learning. Apply these principles to everyday choices, and little by little, you get better at making decisions, more confident, more effective in all areas of your life.
This is starting to make a lot of sense. It's like DI is giving me this whole new way of looking at decisions. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, unsure, I feel more in control.
That's the power of a structured approach. And it's even more important now, in a world where we're just bombarded with information. So many choices all the time.
All right, I'm sold. I'm a DI convert now. But before we wrap up this part, I gotta ask, we've talked a lot about the good stuff, but are there downsides, risks we need to be aware of? Could getting too reliant on data, on algorithms, actually make us worse at making decisions in some cases?
That's a great question and worth thinking about for sure. It's definitely possible to go too far, to be so reliant on data that we ignore our intuition or common sense.
Like when your GPS tells you to drive straight into a lake and you just blindly follow it?
Exactly. Data is a tool, not a replacement for human judgment. And sometimes, a more intuitive approach or even an emotional one might be the better choice.
So it's about balance, using data to guide us, but also trusting our gut, our own experience.
You got it. And I think that leads perfectly into the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore the future of decision intelligence, what it all means for us.
All right, listeners, stick with us. We'll be right back to finish our exploration of decision intelligence. And we're back, ready to wrap up our deep dive into decision intelligence. We've covered a lot of ground, what DI even is, real-world examples, the ethics of it all, even some potential downsides.
It's been quite the journey, and I think what's becoming clear is that DI, this isn't just like a tech fad. It's changing how we think about decisions, how we approach them at a fundamental level.
Yeah, totally agree. Feels like we're at the beginning of something huge. Data, algorithms, they're playing a bigger role all the time. So as we move forward, the big question, what's next? What does the future of DI look like? Any trends, possibilities we should be watching?
Well, one trend I find super interesting is the move towards like personalized DI. Right now, a lot of the applications, they're focused on organizations, helping companies make decisions.
Yeah.
But as the tech gets better, I think we're going to see more DI tools for individuals tailored to our specific needs and what we want.
So instead of just algorithms for companies, we'll have algorithms like helping us make better decisions in our own lives.
That's the idea. Imagine like a personal DI assistant. Helps you decide everything from what to eat, to where to invest your money. You could analyze your past choices, your goals, even like how you're feeling, and then give you recommendations that are truly in your best interest.
Okay, yeah, that's a future I could get behind. But hold on, before we get too carried away, there are still some hurdles to clear, right? Before DI can truly reach its potential.
Oh, absolutely. Data privacy and security, that's a big one. If we're going to rely on data this much, we got to have solid ways to protect that data, make sure it's not being misused.
Yeah, got to build trust in these systems before people are going to feel comfortable, sharing their info.
Right. It's about transparency.
Hmm.
How was the data collected? How was it used? Give people control over their own data and design these DI systems with privacy and security as like top priorities.
And then there's the bias in algorithms. We talked about how bad data can lead to bad decisions, even if the algorithms are super advanced. How do we make sure these DI systems are fair, that they work for everyone?
That's the million-dollar question. No easy answers there. But one thing that can help, I think, is involving lots of different perspectives when you're building and using these systems. Make sure the teams creating this tech, they represent the diversity of the people who will be using it.
So it's not just about diverse data sets, it's also about having diverse teams, humans involved in the whole process.
Exactly. People from different backgrounds, different experiences. That's how you catch potential biases, you know, make sure these algorithms work for everyone.
Brings us back to that point. It's not about humans being replaced by algorithms. It's finding the right balance,
Yeah.
using both human intelligence and the artificial intelligence.
Couldn't agree more. And as we look ahead to what DI might become, I think that's the key takeaway. DI could change everything about how we make decisions, but it's up to us to make sure it's a change for the better, a change that benefits everyone.
Well said. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into decision intelligence, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to take away from all this?
I think the most important thing is to, stay curious, but also keep a critical eye. Don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge assumptions. Think about what this technology could mean, the good and the bad. DI is a tool, just like any other tool. It can be used in good ways or bad ways. The choice, ultimately, is ours.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this exploration. And to all our listeners out there, we hope this has inspired you to learn more about decision intelligence, maybe even how it can change your own lives. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep